I said, can I screen it at the Afghan Embassy on Wilshire Boulevard, which holds 2,500 people?
In 2021, a 90-year-old man flew into space and became the oldest person to ever leave Earth. When he returned, he cried. This was the same man who spent 60 years playing one character that made him a global icon. But space was just the beginning. By 2025, actors in their 90s and even 100s are still signing contracts, breaking records, and working harder than people half their age. What they're hiding about staying alive in Hollywood will change everything you thought you knew. Eva Marie Saint. Marie Saint was born on July 4, 1924, and in 2025 she is 101 years old, the oldest living Academy Award winner in Hollywood history. Her life looks like a long thread that runs through almost every era of film and television. She began in the late 1940s, working in radio and early television, learning how to hold a scene with just her voice and small gestures. Then everything changed in 1954 when she stepped into the role of Edie Doyle in On the Waterfront opposite Marlon Brando. It was her very first film, yet she walked away with the Oscar for Best Supporting Actress at only 30. That victory did not freeze her in one moment. Instead, it opened doors to a string of roles with the biggest names of that time. She moved from the raw docks of On the Waterfront to the elegant tension of North by Northwest in 1959 with Cary Grant, then into Raintree County in 1957 with Elizabeth Taylor, and later into Exodus in 1960 with Paul Newman. Each time she seemed to adjust to a new world and a new kind of leading man. As the decades rolled on, she did not fade into nostalgia. She kept working and kept shifting. She moved through the golden age of Hollywood, then into the rougher New Hollywood years, and finally into modern film. She stood beside Jessica Lange and Sam Shepard in Don't Come Knocking in 2005, then turned and worked with a much younger generation in Because of Winn-Dixie that same year, sharing scenes with Anna Sophia Robb. Back in 1955, she had already been recognized with an Emmy nomination for her television work, sharing screens with talents like Paul Newman and Frank Sinatra. So by the time she reached the 2000s, she had already crossed paths with actors born in every decade, from the 1920s to the 2000s. Her voice also carried her into animation. In 2014, at nearly 90, she voiced Katara in The Legend of Korra, quietly becoming one of the few actors to work across 8 decades of film and television. Even as she reached 100, she still appeared in interviews, smiling, talking about baseball, family, and the old days in a way that felt warm instead of sad. When you look at Eva Marie Saint, you see more than a career. You see a person who kept showing up, kept learning, and kept bringing grace to whatever screen she touched. Mel Brooks. Mel Brooks was born on June 28, 1926, and in 2025 he is 99 years old, still shaping comedy and storytelling with the same sharp mind he had as a young writer. His path started in the writer's room rather than in front of the camera. From 1950 to 1954, he wrote for Sid Caesar's Your Show of Shows, sitting in a room full of hungry writers who would later become legends themselves. Carl Reiner, Neil Simon, Woody Allen, Larry Gelbart, and Brooks all traded lines, punches, and ideas in a space that would later be called the golden age of television comedy. Out of that friendship with Reiner came the famous 2,000-year-old man routine. It started as a private joke they did at parties, then slowly turned into records and performances that lasted for decades. That sketch showed something important about Brooks. He did not just chase laughs. He built characters and rhythms that could live for a long time. Over time, he stepped from the writer's table to the director's chair. He wrote and directed The Producers in 1968, a wild and risky comedy that turned flop theater into gold. Then came Blazing Saddles in 1974, breaking rules about what could be joked about. followed by Young Frankenstein in that same year, shot in black and white, but full of fresh energy. These films did more than entertain. They changed how people thought about parody and satire. Years later, when many people might have retired quietly, Brooks found new life in theater. He turned the producers into a Broadway musical that swept the Tony Awards, winning 12 and adding a Grammy to his shelf. At that point, he had collected an Emmy, a Grammy, an Oscar, and a Tony, joining the small circle of EGOT winners. Even in his late 90s, he kept creating. In 2023, he executive produced the second season of History of the World Part 2 for Hulu, returning to an idea he had first played with many years earlier, but updating it for a new age of streaming. In 2025, he announced he would return as Yogurt in Spaceballs 2, planned for release in 2027. That choice showed how he likes to revisit old worlds while still pushing them forward. The span of his work stretches from early live television to modern streaming projects. He has worked with performers and crews from at least 4 generations, moving from black and white stages to digital sets without losing his voice. When you follow his journey, you see a life that never settled, always twisting and reshaping comedy so that it could keep breathing in whatever era it landed. Dick Van Dyke. Dick Van Dyke was born on December 13, 1925, and in 2025 he turns 100. His career is a long line of movement, laughter, and persistence. He started in the late 1940s as part of a comedy duo called the Merry Mutes, performing silent slapstick routines that depended on timing rather than dialogue. Those early shows trained his body as much as his voice, and that training stayed with him. By 1950, he was already appearing on radio and television, building a name that was still modest but steady. In 1956, he stood in a very different place, co-hosting the CBS Morning Show with Walter Cronkite. The pairing of a future legendary news anchor and a rising comic performer showed how broad television had become. Van Dyke could move from light bits to serious segments and still feel natural. His real breakthrough arrived in 1961 with The Dick Van Dyke Show. As Rob Petrie, a comedy writer balancing work and home, he connected with audiences who recognized both the chaos and tenderness of everyday life. The show ran for 5 years and earned him 3 Primetime Emmy Awards. Its success lifted him from working actor to household name. Then, in 1964, he leaped from the living room to the big screen with Mary Poppins. As Bert, he sang, danced on rooftops, and became part of a film that children and adults replayed for generations. The film earned him a Grammy and sealed his place as a global figure, not just a television star. He kept working through each decade. In the 1960s, he shared the screen with Julie Andrews and Mary Tyler Moore. In the 1990s, he took on Diagnosis Murder, a mystery series that became a family project when his son Barry Van Dyke joined the cast. The show ran for 8 seasons, proving he could carry drama and comedy at once, even later in life. Even at 100, he stayed visible. In 2025, he released a memoir titled 100 Rules for Living to 100, an optimist's guide to a happy life, turning his long experience into simple, hopeful lessons. He had already returned to the world of Mary Poppins in Mary Poppins Returns in 2018, dancing and singing again for a new generation. Across more than 8 decades, he kept finding ways to stay present, light on his feet, and connected to audiences who grew up, had children, and then watched him with their grandchildren. Lee Grant. Lee Grant was born Leova Haskell Rosenthal on October 31, 1925. At 99 years old in 2025, her story is not only about how long she worked, but about how many times she rebuilt herself. She stepped on stage for the first time at age 4 at the Metropolitan Opera in New York, a tiny child surrounded by towering sets and voices. By the time she turned 11, she was a member of the American Ballet Theater, already used to the discipline of daily practice. Her early training pulled her across different arts. She studied music at Juilliard, then shifted into acting at the neighborhood playhouse, where she learned how to carry both silence and speech. In the late 1940s, she began working seriously in theater, and in 1951, she made her Broadway debut in Detective Story. That performance earned her a Critics' Circle Award, and when the play became a film in 1952, she received her first Academy Award nomination. However, her path did not move forward in a straight line. During the McCarthy era, she was blacklisted from Hollywood for about 12 years because of her political beliefs. At a time when she should have been climbing quickly, she was shut out of most major film and television work. Yet, she did not disappear. She worked where she could, waited, and watched the industry shift. When she returned in the 1960s with the television series Peyton Place, she connected with a new generation of viewers who did not know her earlier work. From there, she built a second wave of roles. She appeared with Sidney Poitier in the Heat of the Night in 1967, stepped into The Landlord with Marlon Brando in 1970, and joined Warren Beatty in Shampoo in 1975. Each project came from a different corner of cinema, yet she moved through them with ease. Then, at age 50, she began another transformation. She moved behind the camera and started directing. In 1986, she won an Academy Award for her documentary Down and Out in America, showing her ability to tell real stories about poverty and struggle. That same year, she won the Directors Guild of America Award for Nobody's Child, becoming the first woman to receive that honor. She continued directing documentaries and television movies into her 80s, showing that a creative life does not need to slow with age. Her later acting work brought her into modern cinema. She appeared in The Amati Girls in 2000 with Mercedes Ruehl and Cloris Leachman, and in Mulholland Drive in 2001 with Naomi Watts. She has worked with both Kirk Douglas and Michael Douglas, and with actors like Paul Sorvino and Sean Young, stretching her collaborations from classic studio stars to contemporary performers. Lee Grant's life shows how someone can be pushed aside, return, and then help reshape the very world that once shut them out. Clint Eastwood. Clint Eastwood was born on May 31, 1930, and by 2025, he is 95 years old and still working. His career in Hollywood has lasted about 69 years, beginning when he signed a contract with Universal Pictures in 1954. At first, he struggled. He appeared in small roles in films like Tarantula in 1955 and Revenge of the Creature that same year, often playing parts few people remembered. But those sets taught him how movies were made, where the camera moved, and how crews worked. His breakthrough came in 1959, when he landed the role of Rowdy Yates in the television series Rawhide. The show ran for years and made him a familiar face in American homes. Soon after, he stepped into the world of Western films with Sergio Leone, working on the famous Dollars trilogy from 1964 to 1966 with actors like Lee Van Cleef and Eli Wallach. His quiet, controlled presence as the mysterious gunslinger turned him into a global figure. Over time, he grew tired of only acting and began directing. His directing career would eventually include 40 films. Works like Unforgiven in 1992, $1 Million Baby in 2004, and American Sniper in 2014 earned both box office success and critical respect. He won 2 Academy Awards for Best Director and 2 for Best Picture. And at 74, he became the oldest person ever to win the Best Director Oscar. Eastwood is known for working quickly. He often finishes scenes in 1 or 2 takes, trusting his instincts and his actors. Many crew members have stayed with him for decades, forming a tight circle that moves efficiently from one project to the next. That rhythm allows him to keep making films even as he approaches his mid-90s. His collaborators cover a huge span of ages. He acted with Meryl Streep in The Bridges of Madison County in 1995, and in later films he has worked with Hilary Swank and Morgan Freeman. In some of his most recent projects, his youngest co-stars are more than 70 years younger than he is, which means he stands in the same scenes as actors who grew up watching him on screen. In 2024, he released Juror 2, a legal drama that critics praised for its clear storytelling and strong performances. Even late in life, he avoids simple repetition. He resists remakes and sequels that do not interest him, often saying that it is better to try something new than repeat old work. At 95, still planning new films, Clint Eastwood shows what can happen when someone keeps learning and creating instead of stepping away. James Hong was born in 1930 in Minneapolis, and by 2025, he is 95 years old, with a career that has stretched for more than 70 years. He has appeared in more than 650 film and television roles, a number that places him among the most prolific actors in history. Yet his story begins far from the spotlight. He studied to become a civil engineer and started acting on the side, using his vacation days to shoot his first roles. In the 1950s and 1960s, he began showing up regularly in film and television, often playing small parts that still left an impression. He co-founded the East West Players, a theater company in Los Angeles that offered serious roles to Asian American actors, at a time when most of Hollywood pushed them into stereotypes. That company helped build a space where Asian American performers could grow and control their stories. His roles over the years have covered almost every type of character. In Blade Runner in 1982, he played a genetic designer in a bleak future world. In the Kung Fu Panda series from 2008 to 2024, he voiced Mr. Ping, the warm and worried goose who loves his son and fusses over his noodle shop, giving audiences a character full of humor and heart. In 2022, he appeared in Everything Everywhere All at Once, alongside Michelle Yeoh and Ke Huy Quan, part of a film that mixed action, comedy, and family drama in a way that felt new and daring. Hong has worked with stars from early classic cinema to modern streaming hits. His career links actors like Clark Gable and Audrey Hepburn all the way to Michelle Yeoh and Ke Huy Quan. He has moved from black and white television to high-definition streaming platforms without stopping. Even in his 90s, he continues to push forward. In 2024, at age 94, he produced and starred in Patsy Lee and the Keepers of the Five Kingdoms, a fantasy film filled with younger performers he helps mentor. That project shows how he is not only still acting, but also creating new stories and giving space to others. Fernanda Montenegro. Fernanda Montenegro was born on October 16, 1929, in Rio de Janeiro, and by 2025 she is 96 years old and still seen as a living legend. Her story starts in the early 1950s on stage, when Brazilian theater was finding its modern voice, and she stepped straight into the middle of it. In 1954, she made her debut in the play A Muralha, and from there, she did not slow down. Instead of staying only on the stage where she was already respected, she kept moving forward, stepping into television and film with the same energy she had as a young actress. That is why, even at 85 in 2013, she was back on television in the remake of Saramandaya, acting side by side with a much younger cast and still stealing scenes. And then, even later, in 2024 at the age of 95, she entered the Guinness World Records for drawing the largest audience to a philosophical reading when she recited Simone de Beauvoir's autobiography in Ibirapuera Park for more than 15,000 people. At an age when most people are quiet, she was standing in a park, holding a crowd with only her voice. Her path is also a story about partnership and generations. In the 1950s and 1960s, she worked with her husband, Fernando Torres, and together they helped build what many call the golden era of Brazilian theater. As time passed, she kept moving forward instead of looking back. In the 1960s, she was already working with pioneering TV directors like Walter Avancini. Decades later, she was still shaping stories with new voices, such as director Karim Aynuz in Invisible Life in 2019. Her work crossed borders as well as years. In 1998, she played a retired school teacher in Central Station and was nominated for an Academy Award, becoming the first Brazilian and the first Latin American actress ever nominated for an Oscar. Then, in 2025, her daughter Fernanda Torres also received an Oscar nomination, turning their family into one of the rare mother and daughter pairs both recognized at the top level of world cinema. Her career is full of moments that feel almost unreal when you place them side by side. She has acted with people born decades apart, including her own daughter in the film Casa de Areia in 2005, where they played the same character at different ages. That single film shows how long she has remained active. Her career now stretches over more than 75 years. In that time, she has received more than 50 awards and countless nominations, including an International Emmy for Sweet Mother in 2014, which made her the first Brazilian actress to win that award. Even in her mid-90s, she was still taking on difficult work. In 2024, she appeared in the film I Am Still Here, playing Eunice Paiva, a role that demanded emotional strength and physical stamina. When you look at the whole picture, Fernanda Montenegro's life does not only show that long careers are possible, it shows that passion, discipline, and love for the craft can carry a person across generations and keep them burning bright when others would have faded. Rita Moreno. Rita Moreno's journey began far from the bright lights where she would one day stand. She was born on December 11, 1931, in Humacao, Puerto Rico. When she was 5, her mother brought her to New York, chasing a better life. And very quickly, the little girl who barely knew English was taking dance lessons with Paco Cancino, the uncle of Rita Hayworth. Those lessons were not just cute childhood hobbies. They were the start of a career that would stretch from the 1940s all the way to 2025. By the age of 13, she was on Broadway in a play called Skydrift, and that performance made Hollywood notice her. That first big step opened the door to a life where she would cross decades, platforms, and styles, and eventually become the first Latina performer to win an Emmy, a Grammy, an Oscar, and a Tony. It is a group so rare that only 11 people in history have done it. Her big explosion into worldwide fame came in 1961 when she played Anita in West Side Story. That role earned her the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress, and she became the first Hispanic woman ever to win an Oscar. You might think that after such a win, Hollywood would flood her with powerful roles. Instead, the offers often pushed her into the same narrow image again and again, casting her as the fiery, one-note Latina stereotype. Instead of letting that box close around her, she kept looking for other ways to work and grow. She took on summer theater and accepted roles in children's television, where many big stars would never have gone. On The Electric Company, she appeared in every one of the 780 episodes, working with Bill Cosby and a young Morgan Freeman, and she even won a Grammy for the show's soundtrack. She did not treat it as a step down. She treated it as another stage. That mindset helped her stand next to some of the most famous names in film, including Marlon Brando, Jack Nicholson, and James Garner, and allowed her to bridge entire generations of talent. Even now, her story is not something you tell in the past tense. In 2025, at 93 years old, Rita Moreno is still working and still inspiring new audiences. she appeared in the sitcom One Day at a Time on Netflix and showed up on the big screen in Fast X and Family Switch, proving she is not just a memory from the old studio era, but an active part of today's culture. Along with acting, she uses her voice to talk about diversity, gender equality, and mental health. She does not only share her trophies, she shares her scars and lessons. When you follow her life from a little girl moving to New York at 5, to a teenager on Broadway, to a woman who holds all 4 major awards and still steps onto new sets in her 90s, you see a pattern. It is not just talent. It is endurance, courage, and the refusal to let others decide when you are finished. William Shatner. William Shatner was born on March 22, 1931, and by 2025, he is 94 years old and still working, still talking, and still surprising people. Many actors dream of one long-lasting role. Shatner has held on to a whole universe. His path began in the 1950s, when he got his first major television role in 1956 on the Canadian show Space Command. 10 years later, in 1966, he stepped into the captain's chair on a science fiction series called Star Trek, created with people like Gene Roddenberry and Leonard Nimoy. At that time, no one knew that Captain James T. Kirk would turn him into a global icon, or that reruns, films, and conventions would keep that character alive for generations. From that point on, his career became a bridge between very different eras of television and film. After working with the original Star Trek cast members like Leonard Nimoy, DeForest Kelley, and James Doohan, he later stood on sets with actors like Sandra Bullock in Miss Congeniality in 2000 and Candice Bergen in Boston Legal from 2004 to 2008. His role as lawyer Denny Crane in Boston Legal earned him an Emmy and showed that he could move from space captain to sharp, comedic, yet tragic character in a courtroom drama. Over the decades, he has appeared in more than 250 projects, including films, TV shows, and stage productions. Along the way, he has written around 30 books and released 8 albums, proving that he is not content with being only one thing. What truly makes his story stand out is that he continued to push limits at an age when most people are already retired. In 2021, at 90 years old, he flew into space on a Blue Origin flight and became the oldest person ever to travel beyond Earth. When he came back, he spoke about how emotional the experience was and how the sight of the planet changed his view of life and death. Instead of letting that be his final chapter, he kept going. He continues to appear at live events, sometimes sharing the stage with astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson. And he is still active in interviews, charity work, and fan events. He talks often about staying healthy, staying curious, and never stopping. Whether he is riding horses, writing another book, or raising money for veterans and children, William Shatner shows that reinvention is not a single decision. It is a habit that can carry you well into your 90s. Michael Caine. Michael Caine was born on March 14, 1933, and by 2025, he is 92 years old, with a career that almost reads like a map of modern film history. He started in the late 1950s in small film roles, the kind of parts that flash by if you blink. Then, in 1965, he broke through with The Ipcress File, playing British spy Harry Palmer, a cooler and more grounded kind of secret agent. The following year, in 1966, he starred in Alfie, a role that made him a worldwide star and earned him his first Academy Award nomination. That was only the beginning. From there, he moved through decade after decade, working with legends of older generations such as Laurence Olivier and Sean Connery, then later sharing sets with Christian Bale and Tom Hardy in the 2000s and 2010s. His range of directors is as wide as his list of co-stars. Over the years, he has worked with filmmakers like Stanley Kubrick, Christopher Nolan, and Woody Allen, proving that he can fit into very different visions and styles. By 2025, he has appeared in more than 150 films, and his career has run for more than 7 decades, making him one of the oldest actors still linked to major motion pictures. What keeps his story interesting is that he has tried to walk away more than once. In 2009, after the film Harry Brown, he announced that he was retiring. Then came invitations he could not ignore, including the Dark Knight trilogy, Interstellar, and Kingsman. In 2021, he again said he was finished after bestsellers, yet he returned for Medieval in 2022 and The Great Escaper in 2023, where he played a D-Day veteran traveling to Normandy at the age of 90. By late 2025, he was even hinting at one more role in a sequel to The Last Witch Hunter, working with Vin Diesel at 92. Behind all these comebacks, there are also choices about health and family. Caine has spoken openly about changing his lifestyle in his 70s and 80s, cutting back on certain habits so he could see his grandchildren grow up and keep acting. His films have made more than $7.8 billion worldwide, and he has been nominated for Oscars in 5 separate decades, winning twice. When you step back, you see not just a man who stayed famous for a long time, but someone who kept adjusting his life, his body, and his attitude so he could keep doing the one thing he truly loved. Carol Burnett. Carol Burnett was born on April 26, 1933, and by 2025 she is 92 and still making people smile. Her first major steps into the spotlight came in the 1950s. She appeared on television in 1955 on The Gary Moore Show, a variety program that gave her space to sing, act, and be silly in a way that felt fresh and fearless. By 1962, she had moved to Broadway, starring in Once Upon a Mattress, and proving that her comedy and musical talent could hold a stage as easily as it could fill a television screen. The turning point came in 1967, when she launched The Carol Burnett Show. That series ran until 1978 and became one of the most beloved variety shows in television history. During its run, the show earned 25 Emmy nominations and 7 wins, and it created a whole universe of characters and sketches that people still quote decades later. However, her story does not end with that one famous show. She continued to work with different generations. In her early years, she appeared with icons like Lucille Ball and Sid Caesar. In the 1970s, she teamed up with Julie Andrews, Tim Conway, and Vicki Lawrence. Later, in the 2000s, she acted with younger performers such as Jane Lynch and even appeared on the musical series Glee. In the 2020s, she returned once more to dramatic television in Better Call Saul in 2022 and then in Palm Royale in 2024, showing that even in her 90s, she could step into a new world and feel right at home. When people ask about her secret, she often gives answers that sound simple but have deep weight behind them. She talks about staying active, eating well, and holding on to a positive attitude. In interviews, she likes to say she feels like she is about 11 years old and that she is grateful that all her parts, like her hips, knees, and mind, still work. Beyond the laughs, her impact appears in the careers of others. She mentored Vicki Lawrence, who became both her co-star and her goddaughter, and she has inspired countless comedians, especially women, who saw in her a model of how to lead a show, write jokes, and stay kind. Carol Burnett's life traces a line from black and white television to streaming series, and along that line she has carried the same tool with her: a sharp sense of humor held together by a very human heart.